My name is Ida Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how I got banned from my sister's wedding after spending over $10,000, and how I took my revenge silently. The moment that did it, the moment everything snapped, wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, chilling. My mother, elegant as ever in her burgundy sweater, sat like a queen at the head of our family living room. She folded her hands and looked me in the eye like she was addressing a hostile witness in a trial. Then she said the words that would change everything. After several discussions, we've all agreed, it's best you don't attend Madison's wedding. It's funny. You'd think betrayal would come with sirens in your ears or tears down your face. But in that moment I just stood there, completely still, like someone had pressed pause on the universe. I looked at Madison, my little sister, my baby sister, sitting beside my father on the couch. She didn't meet my eyes. Amelia, our cousin, had her legs crossed at the far end of the room, smugly sipping tea. And my dad. He sat back, worn, silent, like he'd given up trying to understand anything years ago. The air in that living room turned thick, like I was standing underwater. The floral rug under my feet felt like it would swallow me whole. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit. I just stood there and asked, why? My mother tilted her head, voice perfectly calm. Because you're doing too much. You've made things complicated. Complicated, I repeated. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to stay composed. I only did what Madison asked. Mom didn't blink. You didn't do, you imposed. Amelia jumped in, smug as ever. She didn't know how to say no to you, Ida. You overwhelmed her. That one hit. Like a sucker punch. I looked at Madison again. Finally she spoke, but her voice was soft, guilty, small. I just wanted a simple wedding. Something peaceful. And you were making it hard. Hard. After everything I had done. After everything I had paid for. I had booked the live acoustic band she cried over once at a coffee shop. I ordered embroidered Vietnamese Aodaes for her fiancé's family. Chase was Vietnamese American, and I designed the invitations myself. I didn't ask for thanks. I didn't expect attention. But I had assumed naively that I would at least be allowed to stand next to my sister on her wedding day. And now here I was, dismissed, erased. My father tried to speak, but it was too late. My mother was already back in charge, already narrating a version of the story where I was the villain. The overbearing sister. The emotionally unstable one. The resentful one. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just turned to Madison and asked one last question. Do you really want me gone? She hesitated. Her voice trembled. I just think it would be better. Less stressful. And that was it. I walked out of the house. Not a single person stopped me. That night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together how everything had gone so wrong. Every memory played on repeat like a cursed film. Madison at age 6, clutching my hand on her first day of school. Me skipping a college internship to drive her to an art competition. All the times I covered the bills no one asked me to pay. Every sacrifice. And still I was told I was too much. At 3:17 a.m., I sat up in bed and opened my laptop. The screen's glow felt harsh against the dark, but I didn't blink. I pulled up the folder labeled Madison Wedding Costs. $9,873.46. That was the total. Flights, hotels, vendors, gifts, deposits. I had never added it all up until now. I stared at the number for a long time before pulling out my wallet and finding the credit card I used for almost all of it. Then, methodically, I began the cancellations. Bellevue honeymoon villa, cancelled. Cooking class in Tuscany, cancelled. Custom jewelry from Harkins. Deposit reversed. Each call I made felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't setting anything on fire. I was simply done. No one knew yet. Not Madison. Not my mother. Not Amelia. The revenge was in the silence. By sunrise, over $10,000 had returned to my account. The next day, I met my boyfriend, David, at a quiet cafe on the north side of Chicago. He knew something had shifted in me the moment I walked in. "I'm out," I told him. He tilted his head. "Out of what?" "Out of the story they wrote for me. The one where I'm always the helper, the fixer, the good daughter." David reached across the table and placed a notebook in front of me. "Then write a new one." I looked at him, confused. "Write every moment down," he said. "Start with when it began. When they first made you feel like you had to earn your place in your own family." So I did. From the time I was 8 and my birthday was cancelled because Madison had a cold, to when I was 16 and Mom told me I was selfish for not skipping a school trip to help Madison study. Every quiet injustice, every backhanded comment, every time my love was treated like currency. And somewhere in the middle of scribbling all those moments down, I stopped crying. Something inside me clicked into place. Not bitterness, not revenge. Clarity. My mother had convinced everyone, including me, that my love had to be transactional, that I had to buy my way into belonging. Not anymore. A week passed. Then 2. No one contacted me except for my dad, who sent a short message. "Your mom's upset. Please try to understand." Understand. I wanted to laugh. Then came the twist I never saw coming. A call from James, Chase's best friend and Madison's college roommate. "Ida," he said, his voice urgent, "there's something you need to know. About the messages between you and Madison." My heart dropped. What about them? She wasn't getting them. At least, not the real ones. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your mom. She saved her number in Madison's phone under your name. She was pretending to be you." Silence. "I think she deleted your real texts. Replied herself. That's why Madison thought you were being cold. Controlling. Everything you sent. Your mom intercepted it." My stomach turned. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "She showed us Madison's phone. And we found her iPad. There were drafts, Ida. Grip. Like stage directions. She made it look like you were unstable. Manipulative. That you were sabotaging the wedding." I couldn't breathe. "Does Madison know?" "Yes. She does now. And she's a wreck." I didn't reply. Couldn't. I sat in stunned silence, gripping the edge of the counter like the ground might vanish beneath me. James's voice softened. "She wants to talk to you. She wants to apologize." I hung up the call, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready to feel anything. I had spent 32 years proving I deserved love. And my own mother had taken that story and burned it to the ground. Now I was going to rebuild it on my terms. I didn't answer Madison's texts right away. In fact, I didn't answer anything for 2 full days. I needed space. Not the kind they demanded from me in that living room, but the kind that lets you hear your own voice again after years of being drowned out. During those 2 days, I stayed offline. I made no calls. I didn't even open the wedding folder. Instead, I spent time with myself. I went on long walks by Lake Michigan. I made my favorite soup from scratch. I read the book I'd been too exhausted to finish for months. I let myself exist without a checklist, without a demand, without guilt. Then on the 3rd morning, I woke up to a knock at my apartment door. It was Madison. She looked different, smaller. Like all her edges had softened, crumpled. Her cheeks were flushed like she'd been crying. She had no makeup on, which was rare for her. And she held nothing in her hands. Not even her phone. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice low. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure. My body tensed like it had been trained to expect a blow. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said honestly. Her lip quivered. "I don't know if I deserve to be let in." That did it. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, her eyes flicking across my living room like it was sacred ground she wasn't sure she was worthy of stepping on. I poured her tea. Chamomile. The kind she used to sip when she couldn't sleep during finals week. And I'd sit up with her, quizzing her on art history dates. She held the mug in both hands like it anchored her. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence wasn't cold. It wasn't angry. It was heavy with the weight of everything we hadn't said. Then, finally, Madison broke it. I didn't know. I said nothing. I swear to you, Ida, I didn't know it wasn't you texting. I thought you were angry, distant, passive-aggressive. I looked at her. Why didn't you ask me? Call me. Her eyes filled. Because I didn't want to hear that it was true. That my sister, the one who did everything for me, was turning into someone I didn't recognize. But it wasn't you. It was Mom. And I let her convince me otherwise. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. I saw the messages. The ones she wrote pretending to be you. I compared the timestamps. I found the drafts on her iPad. And when I confronted her, she didn't even lie. She said she was protecting me from your control. I scoffed bitterly. She's always said that. That I do too much. That I control too much. That I make people feel obligated. Because you do things she would never do, Madison whispered. You love without asking for anything back. And it makes her look bad. That's why she rewrote the story. The tears came fast and heavy then, from both of us. But we didn't sob like in the movies. We cried like people mourning the same thing from different angles. A version of our family that never really existed. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft. I want you at my wedding. I want you beside me. I want to rewrite everything Mom tried to erase. I shook my head gently. I can't just pretend it didn't happen, Maddie. Not this time. I let her twist things my whole life. And I let you believe her. I was wrong, she said. But please, don't let her win by staying gone. I looked down at my tea, then back at her. I'll be there. But this time we do it differently. Clear roles. Clear expectations. Boundaries. Madison nodded fiercely. Agreed. And she's not in charge of anything anymore. It was a beginning. Not a resolution, not a restoration of what we once had. But it was something real. Something earned. Later that afternoon, I met with Aunt Laura again. I told her everything. About the impersonation. About the fake text. About my mother's lies. She didn't look surprised. She just looked tired. She did it to me too, she said. Made me out to be the villain in the family after I chose not to let her take over my wedding. She has a pattern, Ida. It always starts with control, then isolation, then character assassination. I know, I said. But I'm done letting her write the script. And I meant it. That week, I compiled every piece of evidence. Messages, call logs, voice recordings, financial receipts. I printed them out. Not for a fight. Not for revenge. But for clarity. When I sat down with my dad, Madison, Aunt Eleanor, and even Grandma June, I laid everything on the table. Literally. A black leather case filled with truth. No drama. No accusations. Just facts. And the silence afterward said everything. No one defended my mother. Not this time. My father spoke first. He admitted he'd suspected something was wrong but didn't know what to do. I thought staying neutral was the same as keeping the peace, he said, shame in his voice. But it wasn't. It was betrayal in slow motion. Madison just cried. I'm sorry for doubting you, she whispered. You didn't deserve that. He nodded. I know. But I also let it happen over and over. That stops now. We created a new plan. The wedding would still happen, but not at the Bellevue Hotel my mother had chosen. It would be moved to a lakeside estate near Lake Geneva, one that Madison and Chase genuinely loved. A professional wedding coordinator would handle all logistics. And most importantly, all communication would be direct. No middlemen, no mom. My mother wasn't invited to the planning meetings. And when she found out, she blew up. Sent messages to the whole extended family calling me unstable. Told relatives I was lashing out. And emotionally manipulative. But this time I had the receipts. Literally. Screenshots, call logs, and recorded voicemails. I sent a PDF file titled Setting the Record Straight to our entire extended family. It was clean. Factual. I didn't stoop to her level. I simply let the truth speak for itself. Some relatives apologized. Some stayed silent. Some still didn't respond. But it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. On a sunny morning in early July, the wedding took place. Clear skies. Light breeze. Not a trace of chaos. I stood beside Madison as her maid of honor. Her real maid of honor. And when she turned to me just before walking down the aisle and whispered, "Are you mad at me?" I didn't lie. "Yes," I said. "But that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. It just means I love you differently now." She cried again. But I didn't wipe her tears. I just handed her a tissue and stepped back. She walked forward, alone. And I let her. I no longer needed to carry anyone anymore. Not her. Not Mom. Not even the version of me they invented to justify their silence. After the ceremony, the wedding guests gathered beneath a canopy of twinkling fairy lights strung between ancient oaks on the estate lawn. The kind of evening that looks like a postcard. Warm laughter, clinking glasses, couples slow dancing barefoot on the grass. A scene so picturesque you'd almost forget the wreckage it was built upon. But I hadn't forgotten. Not for a second. I sat at a quiet table near the back, beside Aunt Eleanor and Grandma June. Madison floated from guest to guest like a light wind. Gracious, glowing, free. Not once did she glance at the farthest table, where our mother sat alone, posture stiff, lips drawn tight in disapproval. She'd shown up after all, of course. Not with fanfare. No dramatic entrance. Just a quiet, seething presence in the corner of the event she could no longer control. When the MC announced, "A warm round of applause for our maid of honor Ida Monroe," I saw her eyes twitch, just once. The applause roared. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I just nodded slightly and raised my glass, quietly acknowledging the moment. I had no interest in giving a speech. That was my choice now. My voice was no longer a gift to be offered at the convenience of those who once silenced it. Rebecca, one of Madison's college best friends, stood up instead. She gave a lovely, genuine speech, filled with inside jokes and tender memories. Then James followed, speaking about how love wasn't found in grand gestures but in the way someone shows up when no one's watching. They didn't mention me by name. But their words carved through the air like gentle knives, slicing through the false narratives that had hung around me for years. At one point I looked over and saw my father, seated beside my mother, clapping slowly, face unreadable. She didn't clap. She just stared at her wine glass like it might hold some answer to the question that had clearly been haunting her all night. How did I lose control of everything? The answer was simple. She never had it to begin with. Later that week, I received a handwritten letter from Madison. No text. No email. Just pen and paper like we used to do when we were kids, hiding notes under each other's pillows. It read, "Ida, I'm covering our honeymoon costs this time. I want you to know that. I'm also starting therapy. I don't know who I became under Mom's influence. I only know that I'm ashamed of the way I treated you. Not just this year, but for most of my adult life. Thank you for loving me in the strongest way possible, even when I didn't see it. Love." I read it 3 times, then folded it gently and placed it in my journal. I wasn't ready to forgive everything, but I was ready to begin. My dad asked me to meet him for coffee that Sunday. We met at a quiet spot near his shop. The kind of place with mismatched mugs and hand-painted menus. He looked tired, older than the last time I saw him. But his eyes, soft, searching, were the same ones I remembered from my childhood, the ones that always looked the other way when Mom turned cold. "I've been thinking about starting therapy too," he said, stirring his coffee slowly. I raised an eyebrow. "You?" He nodded. "Your mom, she said she's starting. Voluntarily. I don't expect miracles. But it made me realize I can't pretend to be neutral anymore. I thought being silent meant I was keeping the family together. But I was just letting the strongest person carry everything until she collapsed." I blinked back unexpected tears. He leaned forward. "I'm sorry for not seeing you. For not protecting you. I know, I said softly. We sat in silence for a while after that. Just two people trying to rewrite the last 3 decades with honesty. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was enough to keep me in my seat. Before we left, he pulled out an envelope from his coat. Your mom wrote something too, he said. I haven't read it. I don't know what it says. You don't have to take it. I took it anyway. That night, I held the unopened envelope for a long time. I placed it on my desk beside a candle and my framed degree from Northwestern, things I'd earned through sweat, sacrifice, and silence. I didn't open it. Not yet. Therapy with Laurel became my anchor. Every Thursday at 5 p.m., I sat in her softly lit office filled with lavender and quiet, and peeled back layer after layer of myself. She asked me things no one had ever dared to. Who are you if you're not the fixer? Who comforts you when you're exhausted? What does love look like when it's not a transaction? Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I sat there silent, just breathing. But every week, I left feeling a little less like a burden and a little more like a person. One session, I told her about how I used to practice crying in the mirror as a teenager, just to see what I would look like if someone actually cared that I was hurting. Laurel didn't interrupt. She just said, that's grief. The grief of being invisible. I cried harder that day than I ever had before. Madison and I started meeting once a week. First, it was awkward. We didn't talk about the wedding, or Mom, or the messages. We just existed beside each other. Lunch, walk through bookstores, reminisced. Then, slowly, the real conversations came. She asked about the fake messages, about how much I'd spent, about the nights I cried alone in parking garages wondering if I was ever truly her sister or just her unpaid life assistant. She apologized, over and over. But the real healing came when she stopped apologizing and started listening. One night, over hot pho and shared spring rolls, she said, I talked to Mom. Really talked. For the first time in my life I told her no. And she didn't handle it well. I chuckled softly. She's not used to no. I told her she needs to go to therapy if she wants a relationship with me. She cried, screamed, called me ungrateful. But I didn't back down. Pride swelled in my chest. I didn't say, good job. I just reached for another spring roll and said, you want to come with me to the farmer's market this weekend? She smiled. I'd like that. The final chapter of this whole mess didn't come with a bang. It came with a quiet Saturday morning months later, when I received a small card in the mail. It was from my mother. Short. Barely 10 words. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hope you heal. There was no manipulation. No blame. I didn't cry. I didn't write back. But I placed the card beside Madison's letter in my journal. 2 sisters. 1 mother. Years of manipulation. And finally the truth. I didn't know how to feel after receiving that card from my mother. It was the apology I had long imagined, but not in the way I'd imagined it. No theatrics. No explanations. Just a flat, brittle sentence like a leaf dried too long in the sun. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hope you heal. Was it healing? Or was it an ending? I brought it to therapy, folded neatly in my coat pocket like a fragile keepsake. Laurel read it quietly, then set it down on the table between us. How does it make you feel? She asked. I stared at the paper. Like a door that finally creaked open, only to show me an empty room. Do you want more from her? I don't even know what more would look like. Laurel nodded slowly. You've carried your mother's emotional debt your entire life. Even when she apologizes, she's still giving you the bill. I exhaled long and slow. And for once, I'm not going to pay it. I didn't respond to the card. Not to punish her, but because I no longer owed her an answer. Instead, I threw myself into my own life for the first time in years. I started writing again. Not emails. Not budget proposals. Writing. Poems. Journal entries. Memories that never got the justice of words. I'd forgotten how cathartic it was to give shape to things you were told to forget. David, my boyfriend, noticed the change. You laugh more now. he said one night as we cooked dinner together. And you leave your phone face up instead of hiding it under a napkin like it's about to bite. Smiled. I guess I'm finally not scared of what's going to come through it. He paused, eyes soft. And are you still scared of what's not coming through it? That question sat between us like a truth bomb. Because for the longest time I'd been addicted to silence. The kind that follows abandonment. The kind that tells you you're not worth returning to. Now I was learning how to fill that silence with something else. Self-respect. A month after the wedding, Madison invited me to speak at her art exhibit in downtown Chicago. She was showcasing a new collection called The Other Side of the Frame. The pieces were haunting, filled with negative space and fractured shadows. Each canvas was a quiet scream. This one, she said, gesturing to a large painting near the entrance, is called The Invisible Sister. My breath caught. It was me. Not literally, but everything about the piece mirrored my life. A figure in grayscale, standing at the edge of a glowing room, watching others toast champagne under golden light. Her shadow stretched far beyond her feet, tangled in the feet of the partygoers who never turned around. I created it before the wedding, Madison whispered. When I thought I'd lost you for good. I looked at her. You never lost me. You just stopped seeing me. She nodded, wiping away a tear. But I see you now. After the exhibit, people came up to me, asking about the story behind the painting. I didn't tell them everything. Just enough to explain that the shadow in the piece wasn't bitter. She wasn't vengeful. She was free. And that's when it hit me. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I was the good daughter, the dependable sister, the selfless one. And all it ever got me was a seat in the corner of a family that refused to look me in the eye. But now I was the author of my own narrative. No longer the footnote. One morning, as I walked past a cafe on my way to work, I spotted my mother inside. Alone. She looked tired. Not in the polished, elegant way she used to perform at dinners. Just human. Her lipstick was slightly smudged. Her nails weren't perfectly manicured. She stirred her tea absent-mindedly, eyes distant, lost in thought. Kept walking. And it wasn't out of cruelty. It was out of peace. Because I finally realized. I didn't need her to acknowledge me to feel real. I was already whole. A few days later, Aunt Laura called me. She's been going to therapy, she said. Your mom. She's not saying much yet. But the counselor told her she might need to apologize again. For real this time. I didn't reply right away. Do you think she's changing? Finally asked. I think, Laura said gently. She's realizing how much she's lost. Another long pause. She talks about you. Quietly. Like someone talking about a portrait they used to own and accidentally ruined. That visual cut through me like a knife. I wasn't a portrait. I wasn't something she owned. I was the artist. That night I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I started writing a letter. Not to send, just to write. It began like this. Dear Mom. You taught me how to fold towels perfectly. You taught me how to fake a smile at dinner. You taught me that if I gave everything I might be allowed to stay. But I'm unlearning that now. I don't need to earn love. I don't need to dim my light to protect yours. I don't need to disappear just so you can be seen. Forgive you. But I won't give you the chance to rewrite me again. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and cried. For all the years I spent being someone else's foundation, never knowing I was meant to build my own house. Weeks later, as summer softened into fall, Madison and I took a trip together. Just the two of us. We drove up to Door County, stayed at a quiet cottage by the lake, and spent 3 days doing nothing but walking, painting, and breathing. One night, as we sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, sipping cocoa, she turned to me and said, Do you think she ever really loved us? Or did she just love the idea of us? Thought about it. About the performances, the manipulation, the lies. Then I said, I think she loved the idea of control. And we were the easiest things to control, until we weren't. Madison nodded. I'm glad you broke first. Because if you hadn't, I would have followed her into that fog forever. I squeezed her hand. "That's what big sisters are for," I said, smiling softly. "To light a match in the dark. Even if no one sees it right away. There's something about watching your little sister fall asleep on a cabin couch beside you. Peaceful, hair tangled, wrapped in a blanket you used to fight over as kids, that makes you feel both ancient and brand new." Madison's head rested on a pillow with smudges of charcoal on the edge. She had been sketching the trees by the lake just before dozing off. Her sketchpad still lay open beside her, a half-drawn image of me looking out over the water. I stared at it for a long time, not because it was perfectly done, but because it was the first time I'd ever seen myself through her eyes. And I looked calm, not strong, not tired, not carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations. Just calm. I gently closed her sketchbook and set it aside, then stepped outside onto the porch, where the late summer wind tugged at the hem of my hoodie. I wrapped my arms around myself and let the quiet settle in. The stars above the lake were breathtaking, bright enough to hurt. It reminded me of something Laurel said in therapy the week before. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a sunrise. Sometimes it's the kind of night sky you finally let yourself stand under. And for the first time in decades, I let myself stand under it, guilt-free. When we returned to Chicago, everything felt lighter. Madison kept sending me photos of new paintings. Her work had taken a sharp emotional turn. Less flowers and whimsy, more fractured self-portraits and family symbolism. She was digging deep. I could see it in every stroke. One afternoon, she texted. "Therapist asked me what I wanted from Mom if I couldn't have the version of her I hoped for. Said, honesty. Then she asked what I wanted from you. And I said, grace. And I think you already gave it to me." I didn't respond with a long message. Just sent back a heart and the words, "We're learning. Together." And we were. But healing isn't a perfect arc. Zigzags. Sometimes it retreats before it climbs. 2 weeks later, I found myself pacing the kitchen of my apartment, staring down at my phone. I just received a voicemail from Mom. "Ida," she began. Her voice was small, unfamiliar. "I know you didn't ask for this, but I've been writing something. With my therapist. Mrs. I need to face what I did. Not explain it away. I don't expect you to read it. But I left a copy at Eleanor's. Just in case." She paused, then added softly. "I miss you. Not the version of you I tried to make fit in my world. But the real you. The one I tried to shrink. Because I didn't understand her." Blick. I sat down at my kitchen table, heart pounding. She'd never said anything like that. Not even close. I waited 3 days before visiting Aunt Eleanor. She greeted me at the door with her usual warm hug and handed me a manila envelope. "No commentary," she said. "I haven't read it. It's all yours." Inside was a 21-page letter. Double-spaced. Titled simply to Ida. I read the first few lines sitting in Eleanor's sunroom. Then I folded it, tucked it into my bag, and read the rest that night in bed, with a cup of lavender tea shaking in my hands. It was everything I didn't know I needed, and some things I still didn't want. She confessed to faking the messages. She admitted to deleting the real ones. She outlined the timeline of her manipulation, including screenshots Madison had printed from her iPad. She described the exact moment she started resenting me. A school recital when I was 10, and Madison had a tantrum because no one clapped for her. She wrote, "I saw how easily people praised you, and I realized how hard it was to compete. So I did what I thought I had to. Make sure you never stood close enough to the spotlight to outshine your sister. But I was wrong. I turned a beautiful thing, your strength, into something I punished you for." She said she was working through what her own mother did to her, how she was raised in silence and shame and control, and how that shaped her. But she didn't excuse it. She wrote, "I broke something in you, Ida. Not once, but over and over. And every time you didn't break down, I mistook it for resilience instead of recognizing it was survival." That line wrecked me. I folded the pages over my chest and lay back on the bed, tears slipping from my eyes onto the soft cotton of my pillowcase. She had finally seen me. Not as her project. Not as her insurance plan. Not as the strong one who would never leave. But as a person. I didn't write her back. Not right away. I needed to sit with it. To decide if I wanted a new chapter or if I just wanted closure. And that's something Laurel helped me see clearly. Rebuilding with someone who broke you isn't a reward for their apology, she told me. It's a choice. One you get to make. Not from guilt, not from duty. But from your truth. So I wrote my truth. A 1-page letter. Not 21. It said, I see your pain. I see your effort. I see your words. But I need space. I'm still healing, and I don't want to rush it just because the silence feels uncomfortable. This is not punishment. This is preservation. Love you. But I love myself more now. And that means I get to choose who stands closest to me. I hope one day we can meet there, on level ground. Ada. In the fall, I was invited to speak at a leadership retreat for women in business. The topic was boundaries and betrayals. Reclaiming power in personal and professional life. Standing on that stage, looking out at a sea of faces that had likely lived versions of my story, I spoke without fear. I told them how I learned to say no. How I stopped sending money I wasn't asked for. How I stopped managing other people's emotions before my own. How I stopped proving I deserved a seat at a table I helped build. And when I stepped down, I received a standing ovation. Not for surviving, but for telling the truth. Madison came with me to that retreat. She sat in the second row, her sketchbook balanced on her knees. During intermission, she showed me what she had drawn. It was me on stage. But behind me was a wall of mirrors. And in every mirror I looked different. One version was young and scared. One was crying but standing. One was powerful, eyes steady, mouth closed but unafraid. And the one in the center, she was simply free. You get to choose which one you wake up as, Madison said. I already did, I whispered. And I had. It was a rainy Tuesday when I finally bumped into my mother again. In person. Not planned. Not dramatic. Just one of those strangely quiet encounters that life arranges when it knows you're ready. I had stepped into a small grocery store near my apartment after work, grabbing soup ingredients and a bouquet of white lilies for myself. I was browsing the herbal teas when I turned the corner. And there she was. She looked smaller somehow. Not just in stature but in presence. Like the scaffolding that once held her power had been slowly dismantled. Her blazer was damp from the rain, her hair slightly frizzy, and she stood staring at a can of coconut milk like it held some unspoken truth. She turned and our eyes met. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then she gave a hesitant smile. Hi, Ida. He nodded. Hi. We stood like that, two people tangled in history, towing the edge of a fault line. I wasn't sure if I should say something, she admitted quietly. I glanced at the can in her hand. Coconut curry. She blinked. Madison's favorite. Course. Silence again. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. I got your letter. I figured. Her eyes, tired but open, searched mine. I wanted to say thank you. For not yelling. For not destroying me. For giving me more grace than I deserved. I didn't say anything right away. I wasn't there to comfort her. But I also wasn't there to hurt her. I wrote it for me, I finally said. Not for you. She nodded slowly, accepting the truth like it was a stone placed gently in her palm. I'm still in therapy, she added. And it's hard. Harder than I expected. I almost smiled. It should be. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. Is there ever a point where you stop feeling like the villain in your own daughter's story? I looked her in the eye. That's not my question to answer. Then I stepped past her. But not out of hate. Not out of rage. Out of self-respect. And in that brief moment I felt something shift. Not in her but in me. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need her to change to feel okay. I just needed to live like I already was. 'Cause I was. That weekend, I had brunch with Madison on the balcony of her new apartment. She had painted the walls a soft dusty rose and hung a piece of abstract art above the fireplace that she told me was inspired by our trip to Door County. "I'm thinking of applying to grad school," she said as she passed me a bowl of berries. "Art therapy. Working with trauma survivors." I blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "Your story, the way you reclaimed yourself, I realized I don't just want to make art about healing. I want to help other people through it." For a long moment I didn't say anything. Then I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I think you'd be amazing." She smiled. "That means a lot. Coming from the sister I nearly lost." "I'm not lost. I was just buried. And now, I've dug myself out." Later that night as I walked home, I passed a park where two little girls were playing with sidewalk chalk. One of them had drawn a heart with a crack down the middle, and was now trying to color in each half with different shades of pink and orange. The other girl stood back and said, "That's not how hearts look." The first one grinned. "This one does." And I stood there for a long time, watching that cracked heart bloom in the middle of the sidewalk, colored in the way real hearts actually are. Flawed, repaired, imperfectly beautiful. That was me. That was us. The following week, I received an invitation to speak at a panel called Invisible No More: Women Reclaiming Power in Families. The irony wasn't lost on me. For so long I had been the background character in my own story. The dependable one, the fixer, the strong one who never cried out loud. Now people were asking me how to take up space. And I was ready to answer. I opened my panel speech with something Laurel once told me. "When you stop needing to be the hero, you realize you were never the villain." Then I told them the story. Not the polished version. Not the one with clean edges and easy redemption. The real one. I told them about my mother impersonating me. About how my sister let it happen. About how I spent over $10,000 trying to hold together a family that never once asked how I was doing. About how I was erased from a wedding I helped build. And how I quietly took everything back, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. I told them how I chose silence as my revenge. Not to harm but to reclaim. Because silence, when intentional, becomes power. And when I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Not because my story was unique, but because it wasn't. So many women came up to me afterward. Sisters, daughters, even mothers. They said, "Thank you for telling the story I didn't know I was living." One woman, probably in her 60s, held my hand and whispered, "I wish I'd walked out the way you did." I smiled at her gently. It's never too late to walk out. Or back in, as someone new. Madison's birthday came around a few weeks later. Instead of gifts, she asked everyone to bring a letter. Something they wished they'd heard growing up. A message to their younger selves. At the end of the night, she handed me an envelope. Hers wasn't anonymous. Opened it. "Dear Ida, but also dear me. I wish I had seen you sooner. I wish I hadn't believed silence was peace. I wish I had fought for you when you were fighting for all of us. You're not too much. You were never too much. I hope I spend the rest of my life proving that I see you now. Love." Madison. Hugged her. No words. Some wounds never fully close. But they stop bleeding. And that's enough. One Sunday, alone in my apartment, I finally pulled out the old wedding folder. Everything was still there. The gelato vendor contract, the deposit receipts, the catering spreadsheets, the custom AO dye order confirmation. But it no longer felt like a monument to betrayal. It felt like a testament to how deeply I loved, even when I wasn't loved back the way I needed. And now I was learning to love myself with that same devotion. I clicked New Folder on my desktop. Named it, Ida's New Life. Then I dragged the old folder into a zip file. Labeled it closed. Not deleted. Just no longer active. The morning I closed that old wedding folder for good, something strange happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad. Felt clear. Like for the first time in my life, I could hear my own voice without it being muffled by guilt, obligation, or the echo of someone else's approval. I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's happiness anymore. I was walking lighter, freer. My phone buzzed. A message from my dad. Coffee. Just the two of us. No agenda. My treat. Agreed. We met at the same corner cafe as before. It had become a kind of neutral ground for us. A place where we were no longer father and daughter trapped in a toxic triangle with mom, but just two people trying to rebuild something honest. He looked older again, but softer. Not worn out, humbled. I saw your panel, he said, stirring his coffee. Watched it twice, actually. I raised an eyebrow. He gave a small smile. You were brave. Too brave for a father who wasn't there when you needed him. You were there, I said. You just weren't with me. He nodded, accepting the nuance. I'm proud of you, he added. I don't think I ever said that out loud before. No, I said. You didn't. He looked down. I let your mom tell the story, and I just went along with it, even when it felt wrong. I thought it was love. I sipped my tea. Maybe it was fear. He swallowed hard. Fear of losing her. Fear of breaking the family. And yet, I said quietly, it broke anyway. That hit him. But now, I added, we're rebuilding. Not the same house. New one. Brick by brick. Truth by truth. He nodded. I'd like to help. That was all I needed to hear. In late October, I got a message from Olivia, one of the few friends who had stayed with me through the entire storm. I'm organizing a speaking series for women in toxic family systems. Want in? I didn't even hesitate. I wasn't telling my story for revenge anymore. I was telling it for every woman sitting in silence at family dinners, biting her tongue while someone else twisted the narrative. Before my segment, I went backstage and ran into a familiar face. Amelia. She was speaking too. Froze. But she approached me with a nervous smile. Ida. Amelia. She fidgeted with her sleeve. I want to say something. Waited. I was wrong, she said, her voice quiet. I was caught up in being the favorite. The knew you honestly. And it felt powerful. But it was all borrowed. From your pain. That caught me off guard. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. But I wanted you to know I see it now. What I did. What I allowed. I didn't say, it's okay. Because it wasn't. But I did say, thank you. And I meant it. Talk went well. Better than well. Women cried. They lined up afterward. Some just hugged me without a word. Others told me their mothers were mine. That they'd been erased by siblings. Gaslit by aunts. Sacrificed by fathers who didn't want to take sides. One woman whispered in my ear. You saying, I love myself more now, gave me permission to finally say no to Christmas dinner. That's when I knew this story was never just mine. It belonged to anyone who had ever been cast aside, rewritten, misnamed, and finally said, enough. I got home that night and found a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a framed photo of Madison and me as kids. Me holding a popsicle, her in overalls, both of us laughing, unaware of the years to come. Taped to the back was a note in my mother's handwriting. This was always my favorite photo. Not because it was perfect, but because I didn't make you pose for it. I held the frame for a long time. No tears. No bitterness. Just a quiet recognition that some stories don't end with a bow. Some end with understanding. Thanksgiving came. Madison hosted. Small, intimate. Just the people who mattered. I brought roasted sweet potatoes and a bottle of wine. Madison met me at the door with a hug that lasted longer than any hug before. You're here, she whispered. I am. My mother came later. She looked different. Not physically. Emotionally. She didn't command the room. She didn't correct anyone. She brought pie and sat beside Aunt Eleanor like a guest, not a queen. At one point our eyes met. She mouthed thank you. He nodded. Not because everything was fixed, but because something was finally honest. As the evening wound down, Madison stood up and clinked her glass. I just want to say thank you, she said, her voice steady. To my sister. For teaching me what love looks like when it has boundaries. For staying but staying differently. stronger, clearer, and for showing me that family isn't about blind loyalty. It's about earned trust. Everyone turned to me. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I just smiled and lifted my glass. To myself. To healing. To the woman I had become when no one was watching. My name is Ida Monroe. I was once erased from a wedding I helped build. But now, I've rebuilt a life where no one gets to erase me again. Not even family. Especially not family. Because the strongest form of revenge is not anger. It's freedom. And I am finally gloriously free. Ida's story reminds us that family isn't always safe. And sometimes the person you need to rescue the most is yourself. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Makes you whole. Have you ever felt erased by your own family? Would you have had the strength to walk away like Ida did? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more powerful stories about reclaiming your voice, your worth, and your peace.